A long campaign is now.
This is the car market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is on assignment.
Hello TV and web watchers, Imran Siddiqui here with Alex Villarreal, ready to take you behind the scenes with our VOA reporters.
First up, Oscar Pistorius. The 6-month murder trial is over. We ask our reporter who was in the courtroom what that was like.
A big sigh of relief for Britain after Scotland decides not to separate.
On the U.S.-Mexico border, tracking those who risk everything to cross into the United States.
And the plight of Christians facing persecution in the Middle East.
VOA reporters talking the walk, as you're about to find out on assignment.
The trial gripped the world for months. Oscar Pistorius, South African sports hero, charged with murdering his model girlfriend. Finally, a judge delivered the verdict, finding the so-called Blade Runner guilty of culpable homicide, but cleared of the more serious charge of premeditated murder.
VOA's Anita Powell has covered this saga from moment one. She says she still has no idea what Pistorius was thinking on that fateful night, Valentine's Day of last year, when he shot Reeva Steenkamp 4 times through his locked bathroom door.
I talked with Anita about what she learned about Pistorius, Steenkamp, and their families as she sat in the courtroom right up to the conclusion of this long and sensational trial.
When Oscar Pistorius heard this much-awaited verdict, he acted very stoically. Just before that, when the judge had ruled out murder, he started to cry. And it evoked in a lot of us who've been covering this trial for a really long time a memory from February 2013. And that was when prosecutor Harry Nell asked him a very confrontational question.
Why are you getting emotional now? Is it about what happened, or is it about the questions and your frustration in answering them? Because now we dealt with nothing but your version. Why are you getting emotional?
It's emotional memories for me.
No, it's not. You're getting frustrated because your version is improbable and you're getting emotional. We haven't spoken about Reeva. We haven't spoken about anything now, but you're getting emotional. Why?
I was speaking about Reeva, my lady.
Mr. Pistorius, you're not using your emotional state as an escape, are you?
No, my lady.
What about the reaction from Reeva's family? What was that like?
It was very difficult to watch the reactions from Reeva Steenkamp's family to this verdict. Her father has had health problems. I mean, it must be a terrible experience to sit there in court and hear about your child who's now dead. So her family reacted as one would expect, fairly badly. They were crying, they were weeping. Her mother just kind of stared stoically ahead. Her family later said that they thought it was the wrong verdict. I guess they will have the option to appeal that. They're obviously disappointed, and at the end of the day, they did not get the murder conviction that they sought.
Is the media in South Africa also convicting Pistorius in their own way?
The Pistorius family has, at various times in this process, complained at the South African media for painting Oscar Pistorius in what they said was an unflattering light. So I think if you ask the Pistorius family if the local media was fair to Oscar Pistorius, they would probably say no. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. And the most interesting thing about this case was the cold, hard facts that we saw in the courtroom, and everybody reported the same thing. So I think, although this trial does raise lots of questions about equality, about society in a country that's only been democratic for 20 years, those are sort of side issues. I don't think anybody can say that the South African press neglected to report the straight facts of the case and of the verdict. And in fact, I would say that the South African press really distinguished itself with their coverage of this case. They were even-handed, they were thorough, and they also had a lot of inside information, just because of their familiarity with the society, that really illuminated the case for a lot of us who are not South African and who really learned and gained from their coverage.
The conviction of culpable homicide carries a maximum sentence of 15 years, as opposed to the life in prison Pistorius could have faced. Though the judge called the athlete a very poor witness, she said the state simply failed to prove that he planned to kill Steenkamp.
Well, we're taking a break now. When we come back, we talk with our reporter in London about that time we almost witnessed the breakup of the United Kingdom. You're watching On Assignment. Surveys indicated it would be close as Scots went to the polls to decide whether to break away from Britain, but in the end, the no supporters won out, with 55% of Scotland's registered voters choosing to stay in the United Kingdom.
For the pro-independence camp, a narrow but crushing defeat. For the British government, a large measure of relief. And watching it all unfold was VOA's Henry Ridgwell, who joins us right now from London. Thank you so much for joining us, Henry.
Great to be here, Imran.
Yes, Henry, it's great to have you. Henry, this was a vote with extreme implications for Britain. What was the mood like in London ahead of this historic referendum?
Well, it was a very strange atmosphere. As you say, it was a referendum that really could have changed one of the most ancient democracies that the world has known. And yet, in the 2 years from when the referendum was agreed, right up until 2 weeks before the date it was due to be held, we didn't see much at all about it in the media here. There were debates here and there, but really everyone was focused on other global issues like Russia, Ukraine, things like that. And then suddenly, 2 weeks before the referendum was due to be held, there was a poll that came out that showed a large swing towards the yes camp, the yes to independence, that 51% were going to vote yes and 49% going to vote no. And then there was a big panic here in London. Politicians of all political colours went up to Scotland to try and appeal to save the Union, because all three of the main political parties here supported the Union and wanted to keep Scotland part of it. So we saw a real 2 weeks of panic, of offers of devolution, of greater autonomy offered to the Scottish people if only they would vote against going independent, which of course they did in the end, as you've mentioned, by a margin of 10%.
Henry, if I may ask you, are you a Londoner?
I am a Londoner. I was born just outside and lived much of my life here, yes.
Okay, then tell me honestly, what were the Londoners expecting?
You know, again, they were taken by surprise, I think. London can very often feel like an island on its own. Behind me you see the skyline, all the functions of government are here. You've got the City of London, Canary Wharf, and the huge amounts of political wealth and economic wealth that generates. And so London is really seen as one of those world cities that is almost a state on its own. And people like to know they're part of the United Kingdom, but it really does feel different here. And so suddenly, again, when this poll came through and when the reality struck that you know, 1/3 of the United Kingdom, if you like, or of the British Isles might be carved away and become independent, there was some shock here. And really some people were thinking about the history of it more than the economics, I think. As I say, in London, people lead their own lives. There's a lot of wealth. People weren't so concerned about the economics here. It was more about that history, that 300 years of union, and before that, the battles that were fought in medieval times between English kings and Scottish independence warriors, William Wallace, things like that. So there was a lot of history thrown around, a lot of debate about the economics.
Right, now let's turn to the Scottish side of things, Henry. What were the issues at the forefront of Scots' minds as they went to the polls for this?
I think you've got three camps here, as in most elections. There were those who were committed to the yes to independence camp all along, those who were dead against it all along, and then a portion of swing voters who decided the result. For those in the yes camp, I think they just have always very much seen Scotland as a separate country with different needs, different wants, and different economic circumstances to the rest of the United Kingdom. And they always thought that Scotland would prosper and do better on its own, but also that the Scottish people are different, that Scotland had its own identity and it should be recognised in a constitution. For the no camp, you know, they were committed unionists, many of them probably either born or with family in England or other parts of the United Kingdom, and who saw the benefits of being in a union and certainly didn't want to hive off and be independent with all the risks that might have gone with it. Those in the middle, I think, were more focused on the economics, and that is where the battle was really fought in the end.
VOA's Henry Ridgwell in London. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Henry.
Thanks, Imran. Thanks, Alex.
We're taking a break now. When we come back, the U.S. border with Mexico, the site of a desperate crossing. You're watching On Assignment. The border separating the United States and Mexico spans 3,200 kilometers. For the countless undocumented immigrants who attempt to cross it each year, the journey is long, difficult, and often deadly.
VOA's Ramon Taylor has made several trips to the border for VOA to Texas and most recently Arizona. I sat down with him to talk about what he saw.
For the people that are living on the northern side of the border, both in Texas and Arizona, this has become a very real part of life, a very normal part of the crisis is really directly affecting them in a way that I think speaks to the crisis in a way that you don't normally see in headlines. In Texas, for example, you'll notice that it's normal for school kids to witness new arrivals every day. Many of them who are lost, confused, don't speak a word of English. And you probably have a friend or a friend of a friend that has given food or water to an immigrant that has just made that long journey. In Arizona, you have a very different scenario where you're dealing with even more extreme weather conditions due to not just the temperature itself, but the terrain, which is very mountainous, takes many days to cross. And it's very normal to see a helicopter fly over you and realize that oftentimes, you know, they are not carrying somebody who has made it. They're carrying somebody who has perished along the way. And that's a very, I think, you know, real and telling part of the story that these citizens, no matter what your background is, no matter what your position is, this is a very real part of life.
You profiled a group, Humane Borders, that is working to try to ease some of the conditions for these immigrants as they're crossing the border. Tell us about what they do.
There are a lot of great organizations both in Texas and Arizona. In Arizona, we met with Humane Borders, which is run by just 2 full-time employees, along with some very dedicated volunteers. And what they do may seem very simple and yet so crucial, and that's provide water. It becomes a very, very intricate task what they have to do on a daily basis. I mean, from gaining access to private land, to determining where these barrels will actually save the most lives, to the engineering that goes behind how to keep these cool under those kind of conditions, and then making daily trips to the border, both to warn desert crossers as well as just prepare them for the long journey ahead.
Despite these dangers, the number of undocumented children and families crossing into the United States is on the rise. One federal agency has reported a backlog of more than 375,000 individual cases in 2014. Most of those are from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, countries where gang and drug violence is on the rise. These issues, combined with a U.S. law designed to protect children at risk of sex trafficking, have contributed to the large influx.
You mentioned the drug issue. You got the chance to get inside of one of these tunnels, a tunnel that runs from Mexico to Arizona. What was that like?
That was very surreal because, first of all, if you're native to anywhere this land between Nogales, Sonora on the Mexican side and Nogales, Arizona on the United States side of the border, you're used to seeing this gigantic 18-foot wall that just stretches across the entire landscape. I think that's one of the things that struck me as, you know, just realizing how particular this case is in Nogales, Arizona, where this has become a very hot spot for drug traffickers to dig along with, imagine, a 30-mile distance of wall, and has become one of the most difficult tasks for Border Patrol to try to maintain.
In reflecting back on these 3 trips that you've made and the people that you met, both the Border Patrol agents and some of the people that you came into contact with who were trying to cross into the U.S., what would you say you take away from this?
I think the real takeaway from this is, you know, understand these dangers before you cross. We've tried to spread that message. Drug and human traffickers will do horrible things to you, and if that doesn't do justice to you, then certainly the weather conditions will. But let's face it, we're dealing with a very long-term crisis in Central America, and I think thinking long-term, we have to deal with those issues in Central America just as we do at the very border itself.
Well, immigration reform has long been a high priority action item here in Washington, but it remains stalled in Congress. So advocates' eyes have now turned to President Barack Obama, who has said he will take unilateral action, but not until after the November congressional elections.
Moving on to the Middle East, where attacks against Christians in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere have ripped apart communities that have historically coexisted peacefully.
Well, renewing that peace was the focus of a recent gathering here in Washington of patriarchs of Eastern Rite churches. Doug Bernard talked about that with VOA religion reporter Jerome Sokolovsky.
Praying in English, Aramaic, Coptic, and Arabic, leaders of these historically quarreling churches made a show of brotherhood. It was the first time they came together to Washington. Their followers have been fleeing Islamic militants in Iraq and Syria after being told to convert or face death.
Jerome Sokolovsky, you use this term, historically quarreling churches, in your report. Who exactly are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about all kinds of churches in the Middle East: Syrian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Syriac Catholic, Maronite. These are churches that have had theological differences in the past, territorial differences, over specific churches and holy sites. But now they're setting aside those differences and trying to draw attention to what's going on with Christians in general in the Middle East and other minorities.
And they're setting aside these differences because of what you say they feel is a grave threat to them.
It is clearly a grave threat to them. In a place like Iraq, 200,000 Christians have been forced to flee the country. I mean, that's a great proportion of the total population. In Egypt, many Copts have been leaving. Many Christians in many countries in the Middle East now feel it's increasingly unsafe to be a minority.
The violence, persecution, massacre, these are the different dimensions and manifestations of evil. Therefore, this is not only a Christian problem, this is a human problem.
The goal of this summit is to highlight the dire situation of Christians in the Middle East, and there is indeed a great deal of concern about it among Congress's overwhelmingly Christian members. Many came to show their support, but New Jersey Representative Chris Smith said he'd already held nearly 100 hearings on the matter.
It is not for lack of knowledge, it is for lack of commitment that Congress and the President have not stood up consistently, predictably, to speak out on behalf of the persecuted Christians in the Middle East.
Is it really enough to, as these faith leaders say they want people to speak out? Is speaking out really enough?
It's obviously not enough. They obviously come here not just wanting people to speak out, but also want concrete support from the U.S. and its allies. I spoke to one of the leaders who is very much in favor of U.S. airstrikes and wants the U.S. to not to send ground troops, but to cooperate with the Kurds and the Iraqi government just to degrade ISIS, this Islamic State extremist group. But obviously they believe they will feel a lot safer if there were more Muslims who were speaking out against this.
This is only a part of your report, but it just seems to me, as a casual observer, that there is more and growing religious intolerance in the Middle East. Am I right on this, or?
I mean, certainly among the groups that are grabbing headlines, they are grabbing headlines partly out of propagating a kind of Islam or a vision of the Middle East where Islam is dominant. If you're talking about Islamic State militants, there it's butchery. If you're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, they officially don't want Christians to leave Egypt, but they do believe that Christians should pay deference to an Islamic leadership. It's either way, it's out of whack with what we in the West and what the international system expects with regards to religious freedom.
VOA's Jerome Sokolovsky. Thanks to Jerome and to Doug.
All right, moving now to a different part of the world. For decades, conflict in Somalia forced many people to leave in search of a better life elsewhere. But a newfound stability in the once lawless nation has created hope and jobs.
But many of those jobs are being filled by foreign workers. We have the story from Mogadishu.
Roman Sonyango is the site engineer at one of Mogadishu's luxury apartment buildings under construction. While there are no official numbers, Onyango is one of the many foreign workers in the Somali capital attracted by lucrative contracts.
I'm from Kenya. There are so many Kenyans coming here. There are people from all over Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Sudan, everywhere they are here.
In the past 2 years, African Union troops have pushed out warlords and Al-Shabaab militants, allowing for elections and the first real government in decades. With some stability returning, Mogadishu is getting a facelift, with a building boom and even traffic jams in what was once referred to as the ghost city.
In 2011 or 2010 or 2009, you could not work here comfortably. And you could not work in a tall building like this without fear. But now you can see we can work comfortably without any fear. Everything is fine.
From construction to telecommunications, hotels and universities, Mogadishu is attracting foreign job seekers. This is not popular with young people in Mogadishu like Abdinur Mohammed, who feel threatened by the experienced foreigners taking jobs they would want.
In dadka Soomaalida ah u baahan inay nolol maalmeedkooda ka raadsadaan shaqooyinka hoos hoose.
It's a common feeling. Most of the Mogadishu youths are not happy with the increase of foreign staff. The government should create a law that dictates at least 80% of the staff in all sectors of the economy to be from the local community.
The problem is that young Somalis do not have the necessary qualifications or training because of Somalia's war-torn past. So recent graduates facing few job prospects suggest a possible solution. They want foreign experts to be granted limited duration work permits with the condition that they assist in training young Somalis.
There is nothing wrong with bringing foreign expertise, but let them stay for a specific period like a year, and within that year let them train Somali staff so that they may be able to take up these roles in the future.
The government seems to be listening. It has promised to soon announce new initiatives to generate better opportunities for young Somalis. Abdul Aziz Bilon, VOA News, Mogadishu.
All right, that does it for On Assignment this week, but you don't have to miss us. You can catch us anytime on Facebook, where we have new info for you every day. Just enter On Assignment in your Facebook search window.
Right, and last week we issued a call to our viewers in Liberia to tell us your stories about how the Ebola crisis has affected you. I want to take the time now to read out a comment we got from Liberia from a Suleiman Kone in Monrovia, where On Assignment airs on Sky TV. He writes to us, as we all know, Ebola is real, but a lot of people are dying from malaria and other sicknesses. What do you think of that?
Interesting point of view, but you can also be a part of this. Share your thoughts about this and about other issues that matter to you on our Facebook page.
Yes, and you can always check us out on voanews.com under the Programs tab at the head of the page. Thank you so much for watching, as always. From everyone here at On Assignment, goodbye until next time.